Good afternoon to you. Mark South with HurricaneTrack.com here with your Hurricane Outlook and discussion for Saturday, October the 5th, 2019. Hope your weekend is going well. It certainly is a lot cooler for most people in the southeast, the deep south, with the exception of South Florida, where I saw from Brian McNulty. You might follow him on Twitter and elsewhere. He was talking about that the heat index still in his area down in Miami was 104. I guess it takes a while for the heat to relent down there. But it is rather nice. We had a frontal passage that came through here in the Wilmington area yesterday evening. It didn't rain associated with it at all, at least not where I am. And that's pretty unusual. It's been very dry. If it wasn't for Dorian, we would be in crispy grass weather around here in some parts of the state of North Carolina and elsewhere. Almost extreme conditions, drought conditions are setting in. So we need some rain. We just might get it as the pattern starts to change. We'll talk about that. But let's move on from, hey, how's the weather, to what's happening in the tropics. And I want to show you this because it's important to understand history. I talked about it yesterday a little bit in terms of the going back and looking at the past 100 years and that secondary peak that we get in October. I was thinking it was around the 10th, but it's actually a little bit later. It's right here, and it's closer to October 15th, and it's there for a reason. We call this statistical significance, that this spike in hurricane and tropical storms combined, and then hurricanes only, the yellow there, that is there for a reason, and that reason is over the past 100 plus years, we see activity drop off and then it comes back up again. Why? Why does it do that? Because it has happened in the past. And we can just rattle off names of hurricanes that have formed in October. Most recently, Michael last year. We had Hurricane Joaquin in October of 2015. Hurricane Matthew, 2016. Hurricane Nate, 2017. 2001, Hurricane Michelle, 1998. Hurricane Mitch. Those are all hurricanes in October. Hazel, 1954. And the list goes on and on and on. So this is here because of the statistical significance that that time of year does see another uptick. It's not nearly as dramatic as here, of course, but it is there for a reason. So please keep that in mind as we go forward, and I'll show you some of the model analysis coming up. All right, so moving on along, nothing to really worry about right now. In the Atlantic Basin, we have this one area of interest out in the East Central Pacific. A couple of areas that we will start to watch in the Atlantic over here. I'll show you that in a moment. And then a powerful typhoon is going to develop out of Tropical Depression number 20 in the far western Pacific. This will be of great interest through the Marianas, eventually towards the southern islands of Japan, maybe Japan proper, whatever you call it, the big islands of Japan. Japan's made up of a bunch of islands, in case you didn't know that. This will be a big newsmaker over the next several days, and we'll focus on that as time progresses. Now, a couple of interesting things look like they're going to happen in the Atlantic up in the subtropics, and this goes to kind of show you, somewhat unrelated to this, because most of this activity occurs generally over here, but you do get these periods of development up in the subtropics, and because of satellite detection, that's much better, so forth and so on. But nevertheless, let's see what we've got. This is the first area, 50% chance of development over the next several days between the Azores, which are right here, and Bermuda, which is here. Probably going to be some kind of subtropical development. I'll talk about what that is in just a moment. Then, this other area closer to the mid-Atlantic and East Coast, 20% chance of development. But the bottom line, both of these systems, we are going to get some kind of a storm to develop from both of these, and they're going to send waves back towards the coast once again, and that's going to create problems. We've seen that recently in the last several days, the news headlines of drownings because of rough surf. Lorenzo, thousands and thousands of miles from the United States coastline, is indirectly responsible for several deaths over the last several days. And that is a fact. Had Lorenzo not been there and these people went to the beach, they would not have died in the rough rip currents because they wouldn't have been there. Those rip currents because Lorenzo wouldn't have been there. That's just indisputable. And we have to take these things seriously and understand that when people say, it's a fish storm, who cares? Well, the families of those people who died definitely care. And I care. That's why I try to talk about these hazards. It's more than just wind, storm surge, heavy rainfall. We've got to respect the power of the ocean and remember that the weather is always bigger than we are. And I think the Atlantic's going to stay agitated and get even more agitated in the days ahead. And, water temperatures down here are still warm enough for people to head to the beach. Maybe up here, too, if you have a wetsuit. But just please keep that in mind. It looks like we're going to get some development. And I'll show you here on the satellite. And we'll explain a little bit about what it's going to be. All right, so here's the first system. Right now, it's kind of this upper level low over very warm water still. Dry air to the north, this frontal passage that came down. So you have some baroclinic energy coming in from the atmosphere. There's also the warm energy from the ocean being pulled out. And that looks like it's going to combine into a pretty potent storm system that's going to hang out here where the energy is going to be spread out. And I'm going to try to talk real quick about what that means. What is subtropical? Well, first, a tropical storm, the wind and the low pressure and the clouds and the rain and all the energy is much more focused around that common area of low pressure. It has a warm center. Generally speaking, we call those warm core systems. Very tight banding, and you know what those look like. Think about Dorian, what we just saw with Lorenzo, and other tropical storms and hurricanes of the past. Subtropical storms, on the other hand, are a little bit more loose in their organization. The low pressure is more broad. It's not quite as tight. The pressure gradient is not quite as tight. It's a wider pressure gradient. In other words, the storm is more spread out. The energy is more spread out. And so they are weaker overall, but they can be large and still have some pretty big impacts. The wind field is usually larger. The bands are much larger overall. They look like almost like a big giant cinnamon roll. And, if you think about it, that's what this kind of looks like here, like you're rolling up a cinnamon roll or whatever. I'm serious. That's kind of what they look like. So that's what we're thinking could happen. Both the Hurricane Center and those of us that watch this kind of stuff, a couple of systems out here that could go either way, tropical or subtropical. And again, folks, those are just labels. Those are classifications. The bottom line, energy looks like it's going to try to coalesce out here, create a pretty powerful storm, well, impactful, and then another one out here in the open Atlantic between the Azores and Bermuda, which is tucked away in here somewhere right there. And it's going to be a pretty busy week ahead. We might squeeze out 2 more named storms from these 2 systems. And remember, for what it's worth, I don't like to brag, but remember I said I think we're going to have 3 more named storms before it's all said and done? Well, that would certainly help that idea along. And I think the third one, if this would be, maybe 1, 2, I think the third one's going to happen down here. Although I'm not quite as certain about number 3, and I'll explain that as we go forward here. All right, so looking at the vorticity, and again, this is another way we can watch how these evolve. Stretched out right now. Everything is stretched out, generally speaking. This is trying to focus. This will take longer out here, how this comes together. But we can watch this evolve over time. And right now, everything seems to be stretched out, and so we're just at the beginnings of it. And we're going to start really watching this area right down here. This is an analysis, by the way. This is not a forecast. This is what's happening, at the time this was taken, 1500 UTC. This is the vorticity analysis product from the University of Wisconsin site showing the energy in the atmosphere, the spin of the atmosphere, what we call relative vorticity. And, you see out here, this is a comma shape, classic mid-latitude storm. This will wind up a little bit more round in its appearance, kind of like this, but this also has these appendages. Tropical cyclones bundle it. You remember, I showed you Lorenzo, you remember Dorian and others. They are much more round in their appearance, and they don't have these appendages sticking off of them like this necessarily. All right? So that's what we will be looking for in the days ahead. That'll help us with these clues as we see how things evolve. Okie doke, so looking at the euro, and we're going to compare the euro here with the GFS here, both at the same time frame, the 12Z run today, and these are the same areas of the atmosphere that this is. See how that matches up pretty good? I mean, they're not exactly, the panels aren't, but this is vorticity, and so is this. So here's, let me change to blue over here. All this energy kind of spread out and strung out over thousands of miles. Well, watch what happens to the euro here. This goes in 24-hour increments. So here's tomorrow morning, Sunday morning, Monday morning, Tuesday morning. You see what happens? Energy tries to bundle here east and southeast of Hatteras. Another piece of energy out here off the chart, off the map, into the numbers area, the time stamps. But watch over time. There's 72 hours. Finally, at 96 hours, there's your twins. One there, one there. Now, this is what I mean. Look at these. These are lines of equal pressure. These are your isobars. And they're kind of spread out. The distance between these circles, or lines of equal pressure, isobars, that's what that means, they are spread out. That means that the energy is spread out. These are still storm systems over fairly warm water, so they are going to exhibit both tropical and subtropical or mid-latitude storm system characteristics. It's kind of a blend of the two. And that's a great example of that right there. Now, what these are going to do, they're both going to generate those waves. Like I said, this will do it. This will do it. Those waves will propagate. And it's going to be interesting as these, mix and match. These go this way, and it's just going to be stormy. So you guys in Bermuda, yeah, it's going to still be stormy. I mean, this little spoke right here, if you take it verbatim, that could be a rain band. I mean, it's 96 hours out. That'd be a heck of a forecast if it nailed it. But each of these little spokes in here are generally, I look at these as the rain bands, their energy in the atmosphere. And yeah, it's going to be rather blustery and unsettled in the Bermuda area. At day 5, the storm systems, both of them kind of looks like a Picasso, like one weird eye there, another eye here, maybe a nose, right? Mark's losing it. No, it does. The weather sometimes creates weird things that us humans pick up on. But there's day 5, and then finally at day 6, the easternmost system starts to fade out, it looks like. This one takes over, and I got to tell you, your weather, hopefully, look at that. All those isobars in there. What is that? That is a long fetch all the way back to the coast. Next Friday, the 11th. Wow. The Capes up here, the Delmarva, the Virginia Capes, the Jersey Shore maybe, the Outer Banks. Dang, that is a heck of a fetch. That's 6 days out. We'll have to see how this evolves over time, but that's really getting it. And so, look, it's not that strong of a storm, right? There's a low pressure sitting in there, but that's my point. It doesn't take Powerhouse, Michaels, Dorians, Lorenzos, Camille's, Katrinas, Ikes, whatever. This is going to be a big problem for people in this area, more than likely, if this comes to fruition. Now, this is still far enough out in time that we know how things can evolve, but it's not 10 days, it's 5 to 6 days. Finally, at day 7, it retrogrades closer to the coast, and look what's also happening. I want to draw your attention down here. Look at that. There's the Central American gyre trying to set up. How much have we talked about this in the GFS, and now the Euro at a week out is starting to show it. Interesting, isn't it? This is why I look at the big picture, and yes, sometimes it's helpful to look beyond the 5 to 7 day time frame, and you see some things, we call it noise or chaos or whatever. The model is not going to be exactly right that far out in time, but then you look to see, do other models support that? What is the time frame? Does it keep getting pushed back, or does it get closer to the current time, so forth and so on? Does it match this over here? Climatology, right? You see where I'm going with this? So now that the GFS starts to resemble the pattern, that cyclonic gyre down there, centered around Central America, it should start to get, trying to make me disappear again, it should start to get our attention. And it certainly has mine. So we'll look at this more in just a moment. But that's pretty impressive. You got to admit, that's day 7. And then we'll look here at day 8 and day 9. You know, that's pretty far out. Whatever, right? It's just, okay, let's see what happens. But going back here to day 7, and then let's look at the GFS. Let's just wiggle it all the way out to day 7, right there. Well, isn't that interesting? They are very similar, albeit the GFS a little bit more aggressive, but they are very similar with what's evolving in the Southwest Caribbean, quite dissimilar with what's going on up here in the mid-latitudes. There's the Euro, there's the GFS. So this is, it just makes you go crazy, doesn't it? It's like, wow, these are misaligned big time, you know, Euro, GFS, but down here in the deep tropics, you know, they're pretty aligned for the most part. You know, there's a signal developing there. So the bottom line is we're going to have an interesting several days ahead and much to discuss. All right. Also, as we get through this time period, a very important anniversary coming up, both in the history of hurricanes and, you know, me personally, professionally, whatever, and that is Hurricane Michael. And 1 year ago, we were talking about, and isn't it ironic, very similar setups. We had a tropical storm out here with Leslie. Where? Subtropics. When? Same time that we're looking at for this year. What was going on down in the Southwest Caribbean, Western Caribbean? The seedling that went on to become Hurricane Michael. How did that form? Central American gyre. I rest my case. History can be a guide. It's not the solution to everything, but you're not looking at this and going, oh, that never happened, so it's an anomaly. No, it's not an anomaly. These last few years, Octobers, have been very busy. And 1 year ago, we were talking about similar situations. We already had a tropical storm out there, Leslie. I mean, I get that, but isn't it interesting that they are very similar, well, similar enough anyway to certainly warrant raising an eyebrow and maybe two. So that was the 2-day outlook exactly a year ago. This was the 5-day outlook. Hurricane Center was saying that this would go on to probably become a tropical depression. This was Friday, the 5th. You know how, you know, the way the years go, it's not exactly lining up. This year, the 5th is on a Saturday. But I distinctly remember certainly coordinating with Brent, who is you know, my partner down there in the Virgin Islands. I think he had already purchased the plane ticket, maybe had it on hold to get ready to fly up to North Carolina. We were thinking that it would be, you know, something along the Gulf Coast over here, maybe a Cat 1 hurricane. That's what the guidance was suggesting, and we were going to be ready for it. I still had a camera out here on the Rodanthe Pier that I hadn't picked up from Florence just yet, and I distinctly remember it was actually 52 weeks ago today, but a year ago on the calendar, on the 5th, whatever, that it was a Saturday that I went out there and grabbed that camera. I drove out to Rodanthe and then drove home. And then I think I went and picked Brent up at the airport, but that's getting ahead of ourselves as this evolves. So we're getting closer, much closer to this 1-year anniversary of a Category 5 hurricane. And as I've mentioned, I'm going to go back down there this coming week and visit some people in Mexico Beach, in Panama City. On Monday, I will announce, not former, but formal. I will announce where we're going to be having this showing of the Michael segment from the 2018 DVD. I don't make DVDs anymore. Documentary, that's the word. In fact, there it is right there. Try it. Come on. Help me out here. All right. It's on HurricaneTrack.com/2018, both on Amazon Prime. I also have a YouTube version of it if you want to buy that. I can send you the link to the YouTube version. No commercials or anything. No pop-up ads. Pure HD, all for you. You go to HurricaneTrack.com/2018 to find out more information. A very important event, a benchmark for us in our project. The assistance that I had from so many people, we were able to pull off something that is still being studied today. We're learning from what we captured in Michael. The people of Mexico Beach and elsewhere. I know Mexico Beach gets, that was the area that was hit the hardest, but you've got Panama City, Tyndall, southwest Georgia, southeast Alabama, all the way over to Cedar Key, Florida, and then even up into the Outer Banks. People don't remember that, but Michael, well, if you do on the Outer Banks, talking faster than I can think, Michael went up and caused a storm surge in the Outer Banks of all places. So a very impactful event. I take it very seriously, and I look forward to being back. Move me up here to get ready for my sign-off. And visiting with even more people down in Mexico Beach. They're going to have a commemorative couple of hours there at a place called Mangoes in Mexico Beach. Just a great group of people. All the people that I have met over the years because of hurricanes is remarkable, and I look forward to seeing you all again and seeing how things have been going. I know it's hard. I know more than most how hard it can be because I see it. I see it when it happens, and then I see it as as the aftermath unfolds. In some cases, it takes more than a generation. All right? So we'll keep track of that. We will keep track that anniversary, and we'll keep track of what's happening in the tropics. A busy week again. We had a little bit of a quiet time, and we've enjoyed that. I hope we are, because it's getting ready to ramp up again, I do believe. And on that note, I'll leave it to you. Have a great rest of your Saturday. As always, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you. Believe me, I love the fact that you're there watching me on the other side, because without you, there's no reason for there to be a me. All right? And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Have a great rest of your Saturday. I am Mark Sadeth for HurricaneTrack.com. I'll have more for you tomorrow.